Mhm. So,
Member Jackson will be joining us in a little while, just to say a few words to everyone.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sade. I'm the Assembly Member's Comms Director and Scheduler. I dropped in the chat our YouTube live streaming link in case there's anybody you guys know who couldn't RSVP or register. They can watch the meeting live on YouTube. In case you guys drop out and have any technical difficulties getting back in, we will be up on YouTube, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm not sure that everyone start putting their information in the chat. Yes, Dorcia is saying yes, so I believe it's true. So I'm Assembly Member Chantel Jackson. I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us for this really important conversation. Listen, every single year, people come to us asking about grants, and we want to make sure that you all have the information needed to interact with different offices, to receive funding from specifically from our office. And if it's not like my office in particular, just how in which you navigate the system. And we wanted to make sure that you all have our contact information and know the schedule of when grants are given out. I wanted to make sure that you all met Dorcia Williams, who's my legislative director, and who will be spearheading all things grants in this legislative session. Any questions? I would love for you guys to be interactive, so please use the chat. I'm sure it's being monitored as well by my team. I see Sade is on here as well. So everyone, be interactive, and also Chief Sabrina Campbell is on here as well. So any questions you guys have, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'm sure there's gonna be a question and answer period. If everyone can go on mute, and my team, please monitor that too. Just keep people on mute until they're asking questions. There we go. See, I like that. All right, so take it away. Who's up? I think Dorcia, you're first, right?
Yes, thank you, Assembly Member. Okay, so introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Dorcia Williams, and I am the Legislative Director for the office. So I've been the Legislative Director for this office for a little over 3 months now, and I'm primarily based in Albany. As the Legislative Director for the office, I manage all of Assemblymember Jackson's legislative priorities, legislation, budget priorities, grants, both capital and legislative, her resolutions, and I host all of the Albany events that align with her legislative priorities. So here is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you would like to meet with me. So I just wanted to first start off by asking you all a few questions to try to gauge what you know about the grants process. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Our team is monitoring the chat, or if you can just unmute yourself for the question. So my first question is, what do you know about the grants process?
If you're referring to the, what do they call it, discretionary funding that's provided by the state legislature, I would say that what we know is that the process can be rather confusing.
Thank you. And for anyone else unmuting yourself, if you could also just start off with your name. I think that was a great point, that it definitely can be a very confusing process. If anybody else would like to answer, also you're very welcome to. I'm not sure if anybody has answered in the chat. I can't really.
Okay.
Yes, Jen Rudolph in the chat, she shared that they can be intense and rewarding. Charlene, can a nonprofit agency get a legislative grant? I think, Charlene, that'll be answered in Dorcia's presentation moving forward. But we have that it can be difficult, we have that it can be intense and rewarding.
Okay, thank you. And second question, how long do you think the grants process typically is?
If you would allow me to answer, I'm Dr. Jamila T. Davis from Partners Uplifting Our Daughters and Sons. we were blessed to receive a legislative grant from your office last year. And now it's a little bit over, it's approaching a year, and it's taking us a year. And with your help, we're now almost about to receive payment. So I could say it's a cumbersome process, a lot of details, and I wish I had been privy to this tutorial prior. I might have been in a better space.
You know, as soon as she asked that question, I thought about you, Dr. Davis. Literally, you was my first thought.
But you guys are helping us, so we're getting to the end.
Yeah,
So I'm very grateful.
but she's right, and everything she said is tedious and it's long.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Davis. Does anybody else have an answer?
I'll just say that I've seen the earliest us give out money. I mean, us select groups in June and disbursements go out in October, and that was to a school that I gave money to. But schools have been getting our money for years upon years, so they are already in the system, and they know exactly what to do and who to talk to. So that's one of the main differences. And I've seen it be years before people get their first payment. And I've experienced that with some of my groups as well. So like I've given money in 2021, and there's at least 2 or 3 people I know who have not received their funding as of yet. And it's all because of a slowdown in paperwork.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Okay, last question. If you have been through the grants process, what would you say is the most difficult part?
If you're talking about member item funding from the state legislature, I would say that the most difficult part is the fact that the process is not always clear. And as the assembly member has indicated, even if you get through the whole process of completing an application, submitting the application, having the application reviewed, having it approved, oftentimes in terms of payment, there can be quite a time lag. So it can be a very, very protracted process. And if you're an organization that's trying to do budgeting and trying to budget for a particular program or a particular area of service, not knowing when you're going to receive the funding can be quite a challenge.
Thank you. I think that's a really great point.
Hi, this is Brian Sod from Banana Kelly. We the process, the application process, was quite for us was quite smooth with the help of the assembly member and you and the staff. The trying part was receiving payment because that did take a while. But I have to say, it was a better process than receiving funds from the city. The city's process takes much longer, takes years to be paid. So yes, the payment was if receiving payment that was a little bit lengthy, but not as lengthy as the city process. So just wanted to make sure that I'd let you know what our experience was.
Thank you so much for sharing. So there's a question in the chat. Are there any tips for small nonprofits to obtain grants? We will definitely get into that in this presentation. So thank you for asking. Okay.
And Dorothea, these tips are specifically for the legislative grants that you can receive from members?
Yes.
Okay, because you know there are of course federal grants, city grants, and all kinds of grants. So this today will be focused on state grants.
Yes. Okay, so the agenda. So these are some of the topics that I will be covering tonight. How to request funding from either our office or another state legislator's office. The description of the grant, just describing the type of grant it is and the range for the amount. The sponsoring agencies, grantees typically work with. Funding requirements, the initial requirements organizations typically need to go through to be considered for a grant, as well as once they have been nominated, some of the sponsoring agencies requirements. And the statewide financial system, which is the website that is typically used for grants and the actual grant process. Just an explanation of what the process looks like. So the most standard way to request funding from a state legislator or a city council member is to send the office a one-pager. So that is that can include your organization's legal name, the address, the phone number, the name of the best point of contact, the person who will be filling out the paperwork, an email, the purpose of the funding, an amount, an EIN, and any background information about your organization and the type of work that you do within the district. So the grant description. So legislative grants are known as discretionary funding. It's typically project-based and it's used for organizations' programming. This grant can range anywhere between $10,000 to $70,000, and it can cover an entire program. It's typically a reimbursement, and once you're awarded and you go through the grants process, you will have to show receipts to the sponsoring agencies of the money that you spent prior to being awarded. So it's very important to keep an accurate record of the money that you've spent while doing programming. So the sponsoring agencies. These are the different sponsoring agencies that our office, excuse me, works with. We have the Office of Children and Families, OFA, Office of the Aging, OMH, Office of Mental Health, New York State Education Department, Division of Criminal Justice, and Department of Health. Communication with sponsoring agencies can range anywhere between a day to 2 weeks, and these organizations deal with hundreds of grants, and they operate on sort of a case-by-case basis. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll just say that we as the Assembly don't choose which agencies we will be working with in the year. Leadership tells us these are the 6 or 7 agencies that we're going to be funneling discretionary funds through. These are the ones that they normally choose. And for example, I'll say every year I do an entrepreneurship program. Jamila Davis, Dr. Davis was my choice for last year. In previous years, I picked an entrepreneurship program and they told me, oh, we're not doing entrepreneurship programs this year. These are the 6 agencies you can funnel money through. And so I had to get creative with how in which I request money. So leadership will tell us these are the agencies this year. And OCFS is one that we use often. I've had plenty of conversations with them. They are understaffed and overworked, and they can't keep staff on the books long enough to go through a whole cycle. And that's pretty much some of the reasons why stuff is being held up. But I'll say that. And then I left in the chat also some stuff, Dorcia.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Yes, that is a great point. The sponsoring agencies are often paired with, once decided by leadership, they're often paired with an organization, depending on the type of programming that an organization does. Excuse me. Are there any other questions in the chat?
No, you're good.
Alrighty, I'll move on. Sorry. So funding requirements. The first part of this slide shows just the legislature's requirements, some requirements from Ways and Means, which is the Finance Committee, as well as the Majority Counsel's Office. Organizations are required to be registered as a nonprofit with the New York State Department of State. They must have an EIN with the IRS, and they must be registered as a 501c3 organization. So this is what's required prior to reaching out to a legislator's office. These are also the sponsoring agency requirements. Must be registered on the statewide financial system, must become pre-qualified on the system, and must establish a vendor ID number. So the statewide financial system. The statewide financial system is the main website used throughout the grants process. It was formerly known as Grants Gateway until it combined with the statewide financial system on January 16th. So this website contains a lot of in-depth information about the grants process. And although the website's combined, the Grants Gateway still has, is still a little separate. It still has a lot of information on the web, on the process itself. They have live webinars. It gives the documents that are typically requested by a sponsoring agency, and it has the different forms for organizations to establish a vendor ID, which is the grants management registration form, as well as the substitute W-9. And along with the live webinars and the documents, it also has instructional videos and instructions about transitioning over to the statewide financial system. And the statewide financial system is typically where all of the grant work is done. Organizations typically track their progress and manage their contract within this website. So the actual grant process itself. So organizations first start off by sending a one-pager detailing their funding requests to an office. The office will review the request and determine if they would like to award an organization. Once they make that decision, they nominate the organization's to Ways and Means. Again, this is the Financial Committee and the legislature, and Ways and Means, along with the Majority Counsel's Office, reviews the organization's information to make sure they're eligible for a grant. Once they approve this, they notify the appropriate sponsoring agency, the sponsoring agency that they're going to be matched with, and they send their organization's information over for review. Sorry. Then the sponsoring agency reviews the organization's information, and they begin implementation of the contractual paperwork, which is where essentially they create what is known as a LIF, which stands for a Legislative Initiative Funding Program. And this essentially is just a form. This is just the document that details the organization's information, so that in case it has to be sent somewhere else, that information is sent over altogether. The sponsoring agency reviews. The sponsoring agencies make sure that organizations are registered on the statewide financial system. So if you're not registered beforehand, they typically walk you through how to register on the website. They also walk you through becoming pre-qualified, which essentially you become pre-qualified by filling out a pre-qualification application. And once you're pre-qualified, then you'll establish the vendor ID number, which again will be established through filling out a substitute W-9 form. Once these things are completed, the sponsoring agencies move on to issuing organizations their award letter. And once the award letter is issued, organizations then complete what's known as an award application. And the award application serves as the contract between an organization and the sponsoring agency. So award applications typically need to be printed, signed, notarized, and mailed. Sponsoring agencies require handwritten signatures. And once the contract is established, sponsoring agencies walk organizations through executing the contract, which essentially entails completing documents such as the claim for payment document. And the claim for payment is essentially where you detail the payment, the money that you've spent prior to being awarded. And it makes sure that you can be properly reimbursed. And the sponsoring agency reviews that document, they make sure it's completed correctly. If there's any issues, they tend to reach out to either through email, or they'll send a letter in the mail if something wasn't completed correctly, or if they needed additional documents. They usually reach out in that regard. The claim for payment is also known as a vouchering process, where you complete vouchers, and once you finish, you send it to their vouchering unit, and they approve of it. Once approved, you continue to move through the grants process until ultimately your contract is closed out. So this whole process typically takes up to a year, sometimes a little more than that. So does anybody else have any questions? If not, we can move on. Okay. So I also wanted to share some testimonies for our office. So World of Money is one of our grantees who is still going through the grants process, but World of Money, the funding that they received was used to provide youth and adult financial education, teacher training, World of Money curriculum, adult facilitators, and a youth business pitch competition within PS MS31 Garrison School. The funding helped World of Money expand, offering financial and entrepreneurial education to children in District 79. And then we also have Banana Kelly, who's on with us today. Thank you for joining. The funding that was given to them was used to create a community-based youth pilot program to provide South Bronx youth with hands-on work experience, and the funding improved the health and environment of the community by demonstrating how street garbage impacts the health and well-being of residents.
Now that's the official title, but the Bronx is dirty, and I wanted people to clean it up, and they wanted to do it. It just worked. So thank you, Banana Kelly.
Okay,
Thank you, Assembly Member.
And these are the last set of questions that I had before we can also so you guys can also ask me questions as well if you have any. What are some ways you think the legislature can improve the grant process? What are some organizations within the district that you would like to see funded? And I know we mentioned City Council today, but if you received funding from the City Council, how long did it take for you to receive the funding?
So the grant process, the grant process just needs to move faster, and they need to do a better job of calling people when things are not, like if you hand in the wrong paperwork or you didn't hand in paperwork, I think that there should be more outreach. That's for sure. And that's something that I talk to the commissioners about directly when these issues arise.
Okay. I want to answer the last question. So we also receive City Council funding. And at first that process was a little cumbersome as well until we learned it. It's still not on time, but I would say with the funding that we receive. Usually we know we're going to be able to get it somewhere in and around May, June, and they have a loan process, which makes it a little bit easier to get the money ahead of time. So the loan allows us to work until the actual contract is registered, but they also have a lengthy process, but I find their process to be maybe a little bit more efficient than this one because you can send things in electronically, and this one you actually have to send paper copies out and things of that nature. So if that answers the question, it's getting us a little bit better for us because we understand it. So I think like information and webinars and stuff like this are really good because that helped us to understand that process. So now we're able to navigate through it.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Good afternoon. This is Joseph Austin from Union Grove. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, I guess, close to. So we also received city council money yearly, and the process in the beginning was long, but now it's quicker, and they are actually going to a 3-year process now where you don't have to do all that paperwork every year. I think it's going to begin this coming year, but it's going to be 3 years where they allocate your money and break it down for the 3 years. This process has been the state very long. We have to get much better with communication and replying to questions without us, asking 2 and 3 times the same questions. And I understand it's the state, like Councilwoman said, that they can't even keep the people in the Assemblywoman, said they couldn't even keep the people in the office working. So I understand that process, but we just got to communicate much better so we know what's going on and we just not up in the air on what to do next. Thank you.
Hi, this is Ken Small from BronxWorks. With regards to the first question in terms of improving the grant process at the state level, I would argue that at this point, there really is not a process. And I think that's part of the struggle that a lot of institutions have. If you talk to a different assembly person, their office has a different application process. In terms of the folks in the state Senate, each member of the state Senate has a different application process. Folks, generally speaking, don't know when the window opens to make requests. They don't know when the window closes in terms of making requests. There's no standardization from one assembly member's office to the other, and the same in terms of members of the state Senate. So as I see it, there really is not a process. And part of perhaps what the state needs to do is to actually have a process. I know the city has a member item funding process that some folks may find to be a bit challenging because there is a lot that's involved in terms of registering so that you can actually make submissions, but there is a process. And I guess I can say that there's an element of clarity to it once you've done it for a couple of times. But in terms of applying for state level member item funding, I've been around for a while now, and it seems like there really is not a process. And it seems as if there's a lot of confusion from one fiscal year to the next. So, we know that the fiscal year for the state starts April the 1st, but in terms of making requests, do we start making requests, say, November, December? Do we make them in January? When does the window close? We don't have that kind of information. And it would be wonderful if there could be, if you will, some reforms at the state level so that there really would be a process, and a process that would be clear.
Thank you, Mr. Small. I think that was a really good point. With the state legislature and I guess within each fiscal year of the way that things change in terms of the sponsoring agencies, it can make the process very difficult. But in terms of requesting funding from an office, I would really say that you should request as early as you can. Once the budget finishes as kind of like our deadline to start sending and nominating organizations for legislative grants. So really as early as possible that you can reach out organizations, other grantees, other people who are interested in getting funding as early as you can reach out is what's really recommended.
Can you go to Trevor and then I'll jump in on what Mrs. Small said, because that was great points.
Yes. Mr. Trevor?
Hello, how you doing? My name is Trevor Njoku, founder of Curve Lab. So I'm hearing a lot of people, first and foremost, before I go into it, I've never done this process before, so it's my first time kind of seeing exactly what's going on. So I'm hearing a lot of people say lengthy and very long. Can I have an exact estimate of how long I would expect when I go through the process the first time? That's the one question, because I'm completely ignorant to this. Thank you.
So I would say it takes a little more than a year to go through the process and to get the funding. I don't think there's like an exact like length for when you can expect to receive the funding. A lot of it is just communicating with Ways and Means, the sponsoring agencies, and trying to complete the documents and get them approved as quickly as can be.
All right. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
a lot of it is out of your control. Like I had mentioned, my schools, they would get nominated in June, and then the earliest I've seen payout, I said October, but I believe it was December, so my apologies for saying that. But remember, my schools have been going through these processes way before I even got here. So they have the DOE do it for them. So it's not like the individual schools actually doing it for them.
Right.
And every member process is different. So that's why Dorothea, we do this every single year, and Dorothea is doing it this year for the first time with you all, because my process is particular to me and my office needs. So when you want to get funding from me for the year 2024, we start having meetings with people as it really is as early as possible. But the truth is I make my decisions in June. So if you come to me in July, then you've already missed the deadline. And if you come to me closer to December, then that means I'm thinking about you. I'm considering you for the following grant year. So right now is a good time. Right after budget finishes is a good time to start hitting up members, sending them your one-pagers, being in contact with them to be considered in their, what we call priority or budget items. There's also funding you can get from the state of New York, and that conversation you have in January. You can start it in June, but January you want to have those conversations, because by February 15th, the speaker wants us to give him our request. So our request is what we want to see in the state budget. So if you have not met with a member before February 15th and you want to be considered in the state budget, you are running up against time. We could still probably get you into our letters and to be put in consideration, but it's better to get it done in the month of January, right before we submit to the speaker. The state budget is very different from a member's item. Every member gets a different amount of money. It's usually somewhere in the 200,000 area. So if you need something in like the 3 million, 2 million, this is not the funding source for you. You would need to go to a different funding source. But if you're looking to do small grants that can cost like 50,000, 25,000, 10,000, I think the smallest we can give out in the assembly side is 10,000. Then this process would be good for you.
Thank you so much.
And then Ken Smalls had also mentioned like that it being no process, and that's done on purpose, because every member is kind of given the freedom to decide how in which they want to take care of their district. I think what Dr. Davis said and what you all were alluding to is that there needs to be at least up-to-date process. Like we should be doing things electronically, and we should be able to get to people and hear back from them much sooner, like Joe Austin was saying. So that's something that I've been fighting with. If you all seen the systems that we deal with up here, you'd be like, wait, y'all still writing stuff? We have to physically take papers into people's office for sign-ons. It's insane. Like we are so behind. So I'll leave it at that. But I feel your pain.
Y'all will get to the 21st century sometime.
Yeah, in three centuries next, we'll get there. But I'm not complaining today. I see Teresa's hand.
Yes, hi, peace and blessing. I'm sorry, I was listening, but I had an emergency with my family member. What I wanted to say is that, is there any way that we as constituents can, can encourage the system, to lobby for the system to be better? Because I'm back to doing lobbying now, but I was a lobbyist before, and we would lobby, with different funding, different things, and so that did work because when the constituents, was talking to people, it seemed like they heard clear. The other thing what I want to ask is that I work with people from different states. So do these rules cover just New York or for all states when it comes to this funding stuff?
The funding that we're talking about is very much our state, and
Okay.
mostly the assemblies, and maybe a touch on city council. But we're talking about here in New York State, these are member items.
Okay. And the other question I want to ask is that if a new nonprofit is starting, is there a limit that they have to be in existence before they can apply for funding?
Josie, you can follow up, but I'll say that there's not a time frame, like, hey, do you have to be in business for 5 years, something like that. It's more so you have to have all your paperwork correct. So like I had a younger nonprofit apply for money, and all their paperwork wasn't in order. And that's what kept me from being able to fund them. And they had to get like an umbrella organization to support their mission. And I was able to fund the umbrella organization.
Okay, so well, will this recording be available so I could watch
Yes,
it again?
it's
okay.
It's on YouTube. It's being recorded on YouTube, and the slides will be sent to you all.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is really, really awesome. Thank you so much.
I have one more question, if I can ask that. Once I know the people are getting mailed the award letters, therefore that means contract numbers have been created. It's not possible for them to send your office like a master list of contract numbers, because it's crazy for me to say that my whole thing is filled out. All I need is this number to write on the bottom of everyone to mail in. So I'm waiting for the letter, but somebody's got to know the contract number. And I'm just wondering, why wouldn't they give your office or a master of all the people's contract numbers?
Yeah, you're asking the same questions we're asking. We in every agency, you're dealing with OCFS. Every agency has their own way of doing things. And it's not until they get a call from me or a call from Jersey or a call from multiple people do they act on it. It would be just that easy to just send it to us and we communicate with you all, but it's not. For some reason, it's just a long, cumbersome process that I don't have the answers to. But let me tell you this, I do bring it up when we have conversation with leadership about how bad the process is. And every single member is going through the same exact thing, even the ones who've been here 30, 40 years. So we kind of just all suffering together and trying to, and I'll say this, the governor's office, they do listen, they do hear us, but they're just it's things are changing, it's just moving slowly for us. That's all. I'll say that.
Like watching paint dry.
I guess.
So that's ma'am, excuse me if I interrupt. That's the point I'm talking about. So can we harass the government, the governor?
You guys are free to do anything you want. Be respectful if it's on my behalf, please. That's all I ask.
No, I know how to be respectful. I'm just saying too that that's something that we can lobby to her to see if she can,
it's
release.
It's definitely a conversation you can have with as many people as possible and let them know what the situation is. And I'm doing the same thing, so it doesn't hurt. But I always
Thank
ask, just
you.
move with some decency and grace when you are talking about anything at the Assemblymember Jackson's office.
Hi, I know earlier Andrew Hackman had his hand raised. Do you still have your question?
No, I think it was pretty much answered, and I must say that I'm pretty much appreciate this uh program because of the fact that this has been very informative. I know there's a lot of and some of the people were answering the questions, so that was helpful. The fact that I think that one of the main concerns is as I'm listening to people, is that you want to find something that is like easier as far as the checklist and the waiting process. But it seems as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chantel, that it's improving, but at the same time also it is a process. So I think that but it sounds as though like with the process, if you follow the guidelines, you'll be fine. It seems as though things get better based on what Joseph was saying, as you have been used to the process. So I think it's about, I would say, the riding bicycle routine in the sense of getting on that bike and riding, and you once you start pedaling, you'll be fine. So thank you very much for asking, but I'm good. Thank you.
We also have
Yeah,
a
that's-
question in the chat.
Okay. And I know that it gets discouraging, especially if you are a small organization, you can't stay afloat for the reimbursement process. And that's something also that I've been fighting for, just to see how we can be support, maybe like the loan process that Dr. Davis talked about, or even just giving out some of the money as they go through the process, through the whole process. So these are things that I've been asking for.
Okay.
So in regards to the question in the chat about whether or not fiscal sponsors are eligible to apply on behalf of a Bronx organization, so I believe it more so depends on what district the Bronx organization is located in. Depending on that, then you can reach out to the member of that area to question if you can get funding. You can request the funding.
Is there going to be a time in the slides that we talk about specific members, Josiah? Because I'll wait till then.
No, so there's not a slide about specific members. This slide is more, these slides are more so tailored for our office. But what I can do is create a slide like that when I'm sending this
No.
out.
I wasn't asking that. I was just wanted to make a comment, but I didn't want to jump ahead of your slides.
Okay, this was actually my last slide. This
Okay.
was where we had the conversations. If there's any more questions.
So I want to add that for my office in particular, I spend time, energy, money on programs that will take care of health and workforce development / entrepreneurship. So every year I will give money to someone that's going to do entrepreneurship, workforce development, health and wellness, like fitness or mental health. Any of those things are what I'm truly passionate about, or cleaning up the Bronx. So that's typically what I go for. So if you have a program or an idea that's outside of those things, then it may not be fitting for me. But I'm overlapped by a city council member, and I'm overlapped by a senator and by a congressional member. And we all have funding sources. So even though it may not fit in my wheelhouse, it may fit for somebody else's. And I also fund programs that are going to work inside my district, or they currently work inside my district. So if you are serving someone in Brooklyn, that's not helpful to me. I need someone that's going to take care of the people in the 79th that are currently doing it or willing to come into it and do it. And a lot of people say, oh, I'll come into the district and do it. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes it's not that easy if you're not familiar with the population, you're not familiar with the community leaders, and you're going to have a hard time recruiting people for whatever work it is that you're going to do. So I'm very mindful of those things when moving forward with my ask. We also do capital funding, which is a totally different process. And that's to fix anything within a space that you already have. So, but that's another conversation. I'm not sure if Darcy has gone into that, but I wanted to make sure you all were fully aware when asking for money specifically from my office. Darcy, do you know for the last 3 years how much funding I've given out through discretionary funds? Like each year, what it's been?
Yes, I have a slide on that. Sorry, let me just pull that up. I have a spreadsheet.
And does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah,
Some
one quick question. You used the word legislative funding and I've heard discretionary funding. Is there a difference or is it the same?
It's the same.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's
No
the
problem.
unofficial. That's our unofficial way of saying it. That's what most people know it as, discretionary funds.
So there are two questions in the chat. One of the questions I'm assuming is towards your allocating priority. Someone's asking if you allocate funding towards reading. And the second question is there a minimum and or maximum for the amount of funding?
So, for the minimum or maximum, the lowest that the assembly can give out a legislative grant, it's $10,000. The highest is 70,000.
Well, that changes even so, because before I got here, Assemblymember Blake gave out $5,000 grants, and so it really depends on what they tell us. But in the last 4 years that I've been here, it's been 10,000 minimum, and some people give their whole 200 and whatever they get. And I don't want to say the last part of what they get because it might be a little different for each person, but they may give it to all schools. You know, every member has a choice of where it goes and how they spend it. But 10,000 for now is definitely the minimum. And then I think the question was for me, is that reading question about like, do I fund reading? I've definitely given money to schools to do STEM, but not reading in particular. That's something that you can probably have a meeting with my office to figure out how to do. I can't remember any time that I've given money to a reading program. But are there any other questions?
I just want to make a statement. I just want to thank y'all for having such young women in such powerful positions. It's a blessing for me to see that. I'm 65 years old, and I'm just grateful to have y'all here working so hard for people in the Bronx. I'm a housing advocate, and one of the people that part of the agencies that work are a lot of people from the Bronx. So it's a blessing that I'm here, and thank you so much for having us. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I agree.
Second
I have
that.
a
Second that.
full woman team at this point. I'm very proud of them. They're young, but they are wise. So I'm grateful to have them.
So, sorry, not to cut it off, but 2023, you awarded $280,000 to organizations within the district for legislative grants.
That was last year, you said? To what?
Yes, 2023.
And how much was it?
280,000.
Right. So cut that part out of the YouTube. Are there any other specific questions? There's the question about mental health. We can somebody from the team just give them the contact information for our office. And is there any other questions we can answer around legislation? If not, I want to talk about capital. No? Okay. So if you guys think of any questions, feel free to ask. But capital funding is another thing that we get money for. And in the past, it's been $1 million to $1,500,000. And it can vary per year depending on the budget. And the lowest grant that we give out is $125,000. And we can give out grants, like we can give out the whole $1.5 million to one project. There are, for instance, I've been giving money to my NYCHA developments to do cameras, to do lighting. A member before me, Blake, gave money for elevators. I've given money to fix a compactor. So it's usually stuff like that. When I give money to schools, they usually are asking me for a project that is small enough to do 125 with. So like school projects cost a lot of money. So like they want to do their auditorium over and it may cost over $1 million. But if they have a specific project that I can spend $250,000 or $125,000 on, then I'll give them money for that. Like one school asked me to give them whiteboards. So it ranges. As long as it's something inside the building to create improvement, or on the property to create improvement, we can give capital funding for that. One of my pet projects is Crotona Park. We know that they need $45 million to really renovate the park. But I was able to give them, I think, $250,000 2 times. So they have 5, and they said they're gonna repave the ground somewhere. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what the capital improvement looks like.
Yeah, for capital grant projects, they typically go through Ways and Means, and then they're like forwarded to DASNY, the Dormitory Authority office, and they like make sure that the paperwork is completed, and they also, like the sponsoring agencies, they're one of they're also a sponsoring agency. They walk organizations through the capital grant project. Yeah, capital grant project, and make sure that everything is completed correctly, and then they forward it back to Ways and Means so that the funding can be sent to you as well.
If you want to talk about slow money, it's nothing slower than DASNY, honey. And that's atrocity. Someone's asking for the phone number and email again. So if my team, someone can throw it in the chat. Are there any other questions that we can answer at this time?
Thank you. This has been very helpful.
So for the people who were awarded and still have not received funding, who are on this call, understand that every week we have a legislative meeting. The team is sending out emails throughout the week to the agencies, making phone calls to the agencies, and just trying to figure out where you all are in the process and getting the information to you. This is not standard across every office. Some people just give the money and allow people just to figure out the process. In our office, because I care about where the money goes, making sure that programs actually do the work that they said that they want to do, I spend a lot more time focusing on this, to the point where I tell my staff, I don't care about what else is going on, just do this for me. And we literally just do this. So I've mentioned before, when you are doing your one pager, make sure you have your ask, how much money do you need and who is going to impact. Those are very important pieces inside your ask. I need to know how it's going to impact my district in particular, and if it's something that I care about. So if you care about pets and animals, I love them too. That's just not my thing. So go to somebody else who love pets and animals and you ask them for all the funding. Like I mentioned before, it's usually health and wellness and entrepreneurship and workforce, because those are the things we're suffering from mostly in the district, not having enough income and the health disparities. So there's that. Have meetings, thank you, TJ. Have meetings with my office after the budget cycle. Not everyone, and in your request for the meeting, just make sure you put your one pager in there if you have it, and let them know what you want to meet about. I make my selections in June about which programs I'm going to choose for funding. Capital funding, I have a lot more time and flexibility around when I can choose sites. But I want to make sure I said that. And just because the project doesn't fit for me does not mean it won't fit for somebody else. So please make sure that you are making your ask to everyone. So I work really closely with my city council member, and when I can't do something, I go to her and say, can she do it? And we work in that way. Also with the Senator Sepulveda, he and I overlap the most. So when I can't do something, I'll say to him, like, is this possible? The Senate has more access to resources than the Assembly does, because they're less members. I shouldn't say that, but it's true. They have less members, so they have just maybe a little more money to play with than we do. So if I can't do a project, then I'll say to Sepulveda, hey, are you able to do this? And we try to figure it out that way. So make sure you make your request to every single level of government to see which one aligns. Is there specific funding for houses of worship? There was funding for house of worship that would allow them to, how do you say this? Oh God, it was it was to help house of worship.
DCJS.
I'm sorry?
It's from the agency DCJS, and I think it was
Yes.
around public safety.
It was. Thank you. I was drawing a blank. So the state, if you go to the state website, everyone, there's also funding resources there as well, because you may not even need me to get a resource funding for your project. It may already be an ask put out for that. And DCJS is specifically, I don't want to use the word targeting because that sounds bad for what we're talking about, but they are allowing houses of worship to apply for funding to help them with protection. So mostly the mosques and the I'm sorry. I'm not laughing. Teacher just stepped into the shower. Now his feet are wet. The mosques and synagogues have been using it. So I would love to see our clergy as well accessing these funds.
Yes, I will be able to send everybody the graphic of the securing grants the securing grants. Their applications are due Friday at noon on May 17th. So I'll make sure it goes out to everybody.
And I'm glad you said that, Sade, because we put this stuff out on our social media and in our newsletter. So if you have not subscribed to the newsletter, and I'm sure most of you have, that's how you found out about this, but please subscribe to the newsletter and please follow us on Instagram, because that's usually where we post the most things. And take advantage of those workshops. Even if you can't go, send somebody who can take notes and give you the information, because we had Citizens Committee we did a workshop presentation with Citizens Committee, 3 weeks ago? And we only had like 12 people there. And Citizens Committee gives out small grants, and you do not even have to have an official nonprofit. You just need to have a desire to take care of your neighborhood. I've seen them give money for beautifying neighborhoods, for like graffiti or to plant something. It's real simple paperwork to do to get the money, and they do it within a year. So it's things like that. I need you guys to make sure you stay in tune with what we have going on, because when we have those conversations, I want you guys to be first, to receive first access to it. The Bronx Foundation is looking to be similar to Citizens Committee, where they want to give out small grants to local Bronx-based nonprofits and even just community groups. So that's the other part. With the Citizens Committee, you can go look on their website. Somebody in my team just dropped the website on there. You don't even have to be a full nonprofit. You could just be a community group of like 5 people is the minimum, something like that. And y'all say, listen, we want to clean up this area of our building, and they'll give you the money for that. So please tune in, tap in, and if you can't participate, then send a friend so they can take notes for you. Anything else before we hop off?
Yes, I also just wanted to add, for people who are interested in state budget funding, the Bronx delegation is also a good delegation to present before, if you would like to be included in the state budget funding and things of that nature. Some member Dinowitz is the chair of that delegation, so it's always good to reach out and present before the members as well. That's also
But
another way to
make sure you serve the Bronx, not just like a particular area in the Bronx,
Yes.
but like it's Bronx wide, because he's very particular about it, and the members have to vote to decide which groups they want to give money to. So make sure you serve the majority of the Bronx.
Before everyone hops off, just copy some of the links that I've shared in the chat. DCJS grant, Citizens Committee grant, and the grants news action from the New York State Assembly. I put all those links in the chat.
And follow the New York State Assembly on social media as well, if you guys are big on social media, because they will drop information that my team will figure out how to put into our newsletter as well, but they give a lot of good information. And then if you have questions about anything you've seen on any of those sites, then reach out to us if you need some additional support. I want to say thank you to the team for putting this together. When I say they do all the hard work, make me look good, I really truly appreciate them. So when you are a little frustrated with the system, understand that they are just as frustrated as you are with not getting the answers that we deserve. And I will continue to ask for a better system so that we can get through these processes easier.
Thank you.
DCJS.
And it stands for Division Criminal Justice Services. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Elvis was trying to butter me up in the chat. Elvis, no extra points for you, Elvis Santana. That's our state committee man. No extra points.